Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Somebody wrote in and said, support for adult autistic patient who is stable, living with parent at home. He is motivated to go to his work on Monday, Wednesday, Friday by bus, gets up, dresses, eats breakfast, gets the bus by himself, does household chores, hits all expectations in a timely manner, socializes well with adults, and enjoys cultural activities. The problem is, what happens when the parent passes? How can we make plans for him now? Right now, this particular person is 59 years old. In the case of losing his single parent who is 79 years old, what preparations can be made? How can he be prepared for the loss of his dad? He does not want to live by himself. So what can we do to prepare him for another situation? And this is everything. Right? This is the thing that keeps us all up at night. This is the thing that is super hard. There is no pat, one answer, one and done. This is the hard stuff, but we're all facing this, whether we want to believe it or not.
Yeah. And I will say, honestly, I remember one of the very, very first children that I treated back in like maybe the early 80s or something. I remember having a mom just, break down and cry and say, what will happen to him after I'm gone? And I've heard that question 200, 300 times from different parents. And it is a very, very concerning thought for many parents because and even when the child is fully recovered and doing extremely well, there are certain things that we feel no one else can do as well as we can, right? No one else really understands. I was reading a blog from a mom over the weekend, which was just incredibly poignant and just touching. And she had said something about the child was, and this is also an adult or a teen maybe at that point when she was writing this, and he was having a serious meltdown and, got through to the mom at work, and because all the caretakers couldn't figure out what's going on, and all he was saying was December and mom. And, finally mom gets on the phone and says, are you upset because it's December and there's no snow on the ground, so you think we're not going to be doing all the holiday stuff because there's no snow, right? And and he's like, yeah, that's what it is. And mom's like, no, I promise you we'll do all the holiday stuff anyway. And that was the end of his tantrum, right? So it's like there are certain things that only parents can ever provide, and that's just that. And there's what. There will be a difference, but it's not necessarily, don't think of it as just he will lose things. I think if you are able to, and this comes back to kind of it takes a village, right? If you are able to bring in the appropriate people into his life, and of course, no one will ever be willing to take as much responsibility as a parent. But certainly you can bring in lots of people who will take a chunk of the responsibility, maybe a smaller portion. Mm-hmm. And, my kids are typically developing and they're adults, but also for them, I have multiple people, right? I have, people who can jump in if they have legal issues, people who will help them manage their finances, people who with their technology and alarm clock. No, I'm just kidding. People who will help them in different ways with their medical issues, etc. And that is probably something that, as parents of children who have special needs, it's super important to do, is to kind of gather a group of people who can play significant roles for your child, right? Whether it be decisions or it just be who can visit him. If you have like 3 people who can visit and take care of it, just have a conversation with him every week, then you have a team of people where he's not socially isolated and he's getting someone to converse with and someone who can help him and so on. So I think that's the number one thing. Of course, we all need to have trusts, special needs trusts.
Yeah.
We need to have people who are in charge of the financial and the living situation for our children. But I think it just goes back to trying to find those folks that you can trust and who introduce to him so that he begins to be comfortable with them now. What do
Yeah.
you think, Shannon? I'm sure
I mean, I just totally agree. And I think I took your advice when Jem was little, and it was just something. Listen, there are so many things to look at, right? And I know a lot of people that go, okay, I'm going to go set up the trust and I'm going to do the money thing. And when our son was 3, we were like trying to figure out how to pay the rent. So there was no money to put in a trust then. But what we did do then was take your advice and say to people, we went to one couple that we felt, had circumstances in their life that were going to be conducive, that if they had to do the physically taking care of him, that we asked, would they be willing to do that? But we made sure that every other aspect of his life, that we tended to pick couples, and we said, we're assigning you guys to be responsible for this. My brother-in-law is a lawyer and his wife is a nurse.
There you go.
So we said, you guys are in charge of if he has questions about whether to go to the doctor and if he has medical stuff. And I remember taking social psychology in college, and they talked about the whole Kitty Genovese theory of the world, and that Kitty Genovese was a woman who, tragic story, but we learned a lot from it. I don't even remember the details, but terrible circumstances, that she was being chased. She was running for her life down a freeway, and most of her clothes had been pulled off, and she was yelling and screaming and saying, somebody help me, and no one did anything.
Mm-hmm.
And what we learned, they did all this research on it, and they learned that if you just say somebody help, no one's going to help. But that if you say to someone, I need you to fix it, they're going to be like, I don't know how to. But if you say, I need you to go get a hose, then that person goes, oh, I'm responsible for the hose, and they will go and do it. Yeah. So we segmented his entire life to the point where, Jim and I, it's very important that our son has a theater education. So we assigned 2 friends of mine. One of them has directed on Broadway, and we said, you're responsible. You're his theater godparents. If anything happens to us, you're responsible for taking him to see good theater and to get a cultural understanding of the world. So that the people who were responsible for his day-to-day life, if we had passed away when he was younger, or if he still needed support, they just had to take care of the day-to-day. But we appointed someone else to take care of the financial, and then we appointed someone else that would have nothing to do with Jem, but that would always check in and see, oh, did somebody get divorced? Did somebody die? I need to refill that spot with somebody else. Yeah. So that we created a net around Jem. Now, I will say that what I have learned in the last 6 years, as Jem went from being a teenager to now being an adult, and most of the people that we hung around with, their kids went into adulthood, and I watched the people who had kids. I'll tell you, the soapbox that I'm on now is that even now when I'm talking to parents of 3-year-olds, I say to them, you're going to make room in your head right now that your child is eventually not going to live with you while you're living. And people go, what are you talking about? You're telling me that I'm going to have to put him in an institution? No, you're going to find a living situation for them. Might be that they go live with a couple that has 3 people on the spectrum. Might be that they go live with friends. Might be that they, go into assisted living. I mean, there's so many different choices, right? And more that people are inventing and building. But you have to be of the mindset, because I learned from listening to our parents who have older kids, they want to go, if we build it in from the time that they're young, then their siblings and their friends and their friends' friends, and they want to grow past living at home too. They really do. Like there are some people that it's a comfort level, but they still would benefit from having some of that autonomy of living someplace else. And the thing that is crushing to me always is, and I can think of a group of parents that say to me, Shannon, I feel like I will be a failure if my child goes and lives someplace else.
Mm.
And I always say to them, no, the failure is if you fail to take care of this last thing because you refuse to look at it.
Yeah.
That if your child is living someplace else and you're still alive, you still have the ability to go and do things with your child and make sure that it really is the place for them to be in their forever home. But
Yep.
if you wait until you're gone and let somebody else do it, let's guess how well that's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love you made so many really, really good points there, Shannon. I mean,
But where did I miss? Because you always catch me where I miss.
You didn't miss, and you're absolutely right in that it's super important, that the Katie Genovese thing that you were talking about is like the kind of diffusion of responsibility, dissemination of responsibility. So it's, and it was this girl who was in New York in the 60s, and she was stabbed in an alley, and 38 people or 40 people observed it, and nobody did anything because they all assumed someone else would. And so that is very true. So you have to have people who are given a specific responsibility, and it's different from everybody else's. So you are responsible for his health care, you are responsible for his money, et cetera, et cetera. That is number one. That's like assigning jobs, and that's so important. The thing you talked about, I think that is so important for parents to understand is this concept of placing the child or having the individual as an adult live somewhere else. And it's funny because when we're looking at schools, we do look at this school placements, right? You look at a hierarchy, which is the kind of most intrusive to least intrusive. So it's sort of like most, I guess, intrusive, or the most special ed, like pure special education class. And then there's all these levels, which goes up to regular ed. Right. But below regular ed is regular ed with an aid. And below that is regular ed, pull out. So you have certain cases with an aid. And then below that is just, special ed, but with one session in regular. And there's a gradient, right? And it all works towards independence. Everyone, all human beings have a desire for both social interaction and independence. And so now looking at autism, and there's such a wide spectrum. So it's going to be a different answer for each family. If you have a child who has become an adult and is very severe still, and I have several patients like that, the parents are incredible in that, like some of the parents you and I both know, they've set up, let's say, an art studio for the child so that the child has a location that they can go to and do something with assistance from others, but they can do it separate from their parents, because there's a little bit of a need for the child to do something on their own, have some sense of accomplishment on their own. And as you move up the spectrum and like become a little bit less severe, yes, of course, you might, like this individual, where like they're already, or even more severe than this individual, like there are individuals who are, for instance, getting up and getting ready, but they can't go and get public transportation and go to a job. But at the same time, they can go to, let's say, and get a community bus or a special bus that is intended for them, and go to a social environment or a daycare center or someplace where they can actually do their stuff, right? And there's different levels, but it is so important for the individuals who are capable, they have some social capability, and who are able to live with support, to be given the opportunity to live independently with support. And I'll go beyond that, right? And there's so many levels, right? There are homes where there's 5, 6 individuals and multiple people taking care of them. There are places where there's only 3 individuals and 1 person taking care of them. There are setups where, the individual is living with roommates, but the caretaker is living downstairs in another apartment. So they're separated. There's situations where the individual is living alone and there's a caretaker who comes in and drops it. I mean, it's gradients of independence.
Yeah.
And the more you can encourage that while you are alive, and the more you can plan for that, the better. Because as you and I know, Shannon, despite the fact that autism has been growing crazy amounts over the past 40 years or so and is not stopping, there's still not enough resources for adults. There's all the concentration is on the early interventions and children, and maybe a little bit for adolescents, but there's just not enough for adults. And so if you are a parent listening to this right now and you are privileged or in a job or situation where you can somehow help produce more of these types of living spaces, also jobs. I will never forget, I met a gentleman on the East Coast. Where was it? I'm trying to think. I think it was in the DC area, where he has built and grown a series of car washes, which that's because his brother works at one, and now he has all the employees are special needs individuals.
Yeah.
And so if you are in a situation where you can produce an opportunity for special needs individuals to live in or work at, please do, because that is where they get to experience that sense of independence, independent accomplishment, and which gives them a sense of self-esteem and growth. And everybody needs that.
Absolutely. It's a lot to face. No one can face it. And like we said, there's no one size fits all stamp, like one and done.
Yeah.
But you need to start thinking of it, and you need to start thinking of it now. Whatever age your child is now. Because I have seen the difference in the parents who did face it and their child. There's one parent, it's a couple that they got divorced, and it was right about the time that he was being an adult. They arranged, first they sent him to a 2-week camp, then they sent him to an all summer camp, and then they saw how well he did. He flourished. And then now he's placed in a home where there are 3 gentlemen that live there, in addition to a couple that is the caretaker for the 3 gentlemen. He has autonomy.
Yep.
And mom and dad have their lives, but they have a very rich life with him, and they have a rich life as a family together. And I know when they are gone, that the rest of us are there to sort of fill in the gaps, but that he's going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And mom has said to me many times, she's like, this is the biggest blessing in my life. I could never have imagined it before, but I know he's going to be okay when I'm gone. That gorilla has been taken off of my chest.
So good. So
It's
good.
been so inspirational to me. And I just say to everybody, start now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.